The day my sister posted her dream kitchen reveal on Facebook, I was sitting outside her house in my car, reading a notice of default on the loan I had co-signed to help her buy it. And that's when I understood exactly what kind of family I'd been giving myself to for the last 3 years. The post had 47 likes in under an hour. New countertops, subway tile backsplash, those open shelves people put white bowls on to make their kitchen look like a magazine. She'd tagged the contractor. She'd tagged her friend group. She'd written, "Finally feels like home. So grateful for the people who believed in us." 47 people hitting a little heart button, and me sitting in my car in her driveway, holding a piece of certified mail that said the loan, my loan, the one with my name on it, the one I'd agreed to 3 years ago so my sister could have this exact kitchen, was 4 months behind. I didn't go inside that day. I just sat there and read the notice twice. Then I took a picture of it, drove home, and called my grandmother. My name is Jenna Hartwell. I'm 34 years old. I'm a physical therapist in Knoxville, Tennessee. And what I'm about to tell you is the story of how I spent 3 years being the most reliable person in my family's life and nearly paid for it with my credit score, my savings, and the piece of myself that still believed the people you love are keeping track. Let me take you back to the beginning because you're going to need the context to understand how a woman with a graduate degree and a sensible car and a color-coded budget app ended up sitting in a stranger's driveway. Except it wasn't a stranger's driveway, it was her sister's, reading a default notice like it was a piece of junk mail. My sister Carrie is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the one who got noticed. Not in a mean way, just in the way some people have. She walked into a room and the room adjusted. She had friends the way other people have furniture. Effortlessly, constantly, rearranging them without thinking much about it. I was the quieter one. The one who read books during lunch, who got good grades without anyone making a fuss over it, who learned early that being reliable was its own kind of invisible. People don't throw you a parade for always being there. They just start counting on you to be. Our parents were good people. Still are. Dad retired from the Postal Service 2 years ago. Mom taught second grade for 27 years. We grew up in a small house in Maryville, the kind of childhood that doesn't make for dramatic stories. Stable, ordinary, a little plain. Carrie left for college in Chattanooga on a scholarship she barely used because she changed her major 3 times and then met Kevin and redirected her considerable energy toward building a life with him instead of a degree. I went to UT, then to grad school, graduated on time, got my license, got a job, got a 1-bedroom apartment and a savings account, and a 10-year-old Honda that I maintain on schedule because that's just how I'm wired. Carrie and Kevin got married when I was 26. It was a beautiful wedding. I was a bridesmaid. I altered my own dress because the seamstress she'd booked bailed 2 weeks out, and Carrie called me crying at 11 at night, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll fix it." And I did. That's a small story, but I want you to hold on to it because it's the shape of everything that came after. Carrie would find herself in a bind. I would fix it. And we would both move on without ever tallying up what the fixing cost me. For the first couple of years after the wedding, things were good. Carrie and Kevin lived in an apartment in Chattanooga. They were figuring it out. Kevin worked in logistics, made decent money, not great. Carrie had bounced between jobs, a dental office, a boutique, a brief and enthusiastic attempt at selling things on Etsy that produced exactly 1 sale and a very elaborate organizational system for supplies she never touched again. I didn't judge any of it. That was just Carrie. She was a searcher. I was a planner. We balanced each other out, or at least I thought we did. Then the housing market got weird and Carrie got focused. She'd found a house, a 3-bedroom in Hickson just outside of Chattanooga. Good neighborhood, big backyard, and a kitchen she described to me in cinematic detail for 45 minutes on the phone. The problem was Kevin's credit. He'd had a rough stretch a few years back, a period he didn't talk about much. And though he'd been clean financially for a while, his score wasn't where it needed to be for the rate they wanted. Carrie's credit was fine, but her income alone didn't get them where they needed to go either. She called me on a Thursday evening. I was eating leftover pasta and watching something I barely remember. She asked me if I'd ever heard of being a co-borrower. I said I had. She explained what they needed. I asked her to give me a few days to think. I called my grandmother Dot that weekend. Grand Dot is 71, sharp as a tack, and the only person in my family who will tell you the truth without softening it into a shape that doesn't hurt. She'd been a bookkeeper for 30 years. She understood numbers and she understood people in that specific way that comes from spending decades watching both behave badly. I explained the situation. She listened. She asked me 3 questions. Did I have the documentation of what I was agreeing to? What was my exit strategy if they stopped paying? And did I know in my bones that Carrie would treat this like it mattered? I didn't have good answers to any of them. Grand Dot didn't tell me not to do it. She just said, make sure you know what you're agreeing to before you sign it. So I did my homework. I talked to a loan officer. I talked to an attorney I found through my employer's legal plan, a woman named Patricia who specialized in real estate transactions and who explained co-borrower liability to me in plain terms that made me slightly nauseous. I was fully on the hook. If they stopped paying, my credit took the hit. If they defaulted, I was liable. I wasn't just a signature on a form, I was a financial partner, whether or not I felt like one. I went back to Carrie with conditions. I wanted a formal co-borrower agreement that spelled out a few things, that they'd keep me informed of any changes to the loan, that there was a buyout path if I ever needed off the note, and that I'd receive a small percentage of any equity gained on the sale. We settled on 15%, documented by Patricia, filed properly and signed by all 3 of us. Kevin was a little stiff about it. Carrie smoothed it over. It's just paperwork, she told him. I didn't think it was just paperwork. I thought it was the difference between a favor and an arrangement. I wanted an arrangement. We closed in April. It was a warm day and Carrie cried happy tears on the front porch and took about 60 pictures. She posted the best one on Facebook with a caption about new beginnings, and I was tagged in it, standing next to her in sunglasses, looking like a person who had no idea what the next 3 years would feel like. The first year, things were fine. Kevin and Carrie made their payments. I kept tabs from a distance, checking the loan servicer's website every couple of months just to confirm. I'd set up a Google alert for the address because Patricia had suggested it, and I'd thought at the time that it was a little paranoid of me. It wasn't paranoid. It was foresight. I just didn't know that yet. Carrie and I stayed in decent contact that first year. Not as close as we'd been, but close enough. She'd text me pictures of things she was doing to the house, a new light fixture, a backsplash sample, plans for the backyard she wanted to turn into something. I'd respond. We'd talk on the phone every few weeks. It felt like a normal sister relationship to me, which looking back tells you something about what I'd accepted as normal. Then the second year started and something shifted. I can't point to the exact moment because it didn't happen in a moment. It happened the way water changes temperature in a pot, gradually and then all at once. Carrie stopped initiating contact. I'd text, she'd respond, but short, always short. I called once a month and about half the time she'd pick up. The other half I'd get a text a few hours later that said, "Sorry, was in the middle of something, talk soon." We never talked soon. Kevin had changed jobs. I found this out not from Carrie, but from my mom, who mentioned it in passing during one of our Sunday calls. "New company, better pay," she said. "Good for them," I said. I felt a small, quiet sting that I hadn't heard it from Carrie herself, but I let it pass. People get busy. Life gets layered. What I didn't let pass, and couldn't quite shake, was the login I'd set up for the loan servicer's portal. Because I was a co-borrower, I had access to the same account information they did. I hadn't checked it in about 4 months when I logged in that October and saw something that made me sit up straight in my desk chair. They were 2 months behind. 2 months. Not a lot in the grand scheme of things. People fall behind. Life happens. But 2 months behind and not one word to me. Not a text, not a call, not a heads up that things were tight. Nothing. Just the number sitting there on the screen, quiet and damning. I called Carrie. She picked up, which surprised me. Her voice was bright, the particular brightness of someone who is prepared for a call they hoped they wouldn't have to take. She said they'd had a rough patch. Kevin's transition between jobs had left a gap. They were totally fine now and catching up. She'd been meaning to tell me it had just been hectic. She was sorry I'd had to see it in the portal. She said it like it was almost my fault for checking. I said, okay. I said I appreciated her telling me. I said, please keep me in the loop going forward. She said, of course, absolutely, and then we talked for 4 minutes about something completely unrelated and hung up like the conversation had never happened. They caught up. I checked the portal the following month. Current. The month after that. Current. I exhaled. I told myself it was a blip. I told myself this was why you do the documentation. You do the agreement. You make sure your name means something on the paper, so that even when things get bumpy, you're not helpless. I felt smart, careful. I felt like Patricia's client, not like someone's sister who was quietly being deprioritized one unanswered text at a time. The third year was when it stopped being something I could explain away. I got a birthday card from Carrie that year. I want to tell you I was touched, but I want to be honest with you, so I'll tell you what it actually was. A generic card from a grocery store, signed, "Happy Birthday, Love, Carrie and Kevin," in handwriting that took about 4 seconds to produce. No note, no personal sentence, not even my name at the top. It said, "Wishing you a wonderful day" on the front, which is the greeting card equivalent of a company newsletter. I put it in the recycling and felt something in me go quiet. Around that same time, I started noticing Carrie's social media. She'd always been active on Facebook and Instagram, posting about the house, their life, weekends with friends. I was on her friends list. I could see everything, and what I started noticing was the shape of a life I was not part of. Dinner parties where I wasn't invited, which fine, she didn't have to invite me to everything. But there were family gatherings, too. A photo of her with our parents and her in-laws on someone's back patio with the caption, "Family is everything." I hadn't been invited to that. Mom hadn't mentioned it to me. When I brought it up gently on our Sunday call, Mom got quiet in that particular way she has. The way that means she is choosing her words like she's stepping over something breakable on the floor. She said, "Carrie just had a small get-together. I think it was mostly Kevin's family." It wasn't mostly Kevin's family. I could see the photo. My parents were both there. I didn't say that. I just said okay and changed the subject. But that evening, I opened a new notes document on my phone, and I titled it Record. And I started writing things down, not dramatically, not angrily, just with the quiet precision of a person who has started to understand that memory is not documentation, and that she might need documentation. December came. I sent Carrie and Kevin a Christmas gift, something nice, something I'd chosen on purpose, a custom piece for their kitchen that I'd had made through a small shop in Asheville. Signed, shipped, tracking confirmed as delivered on the 19th. Christmas passed, then New Year's, then mid-January. No acknowledgement. I texted Carrie once, casual, "Hey, just wanted to make sure the package arrived okay." She wrote back 2 days later, "Oh my gosh, yes it did. We love it. Sorry I forgot to say thank you. Things have been insane." I said I was glad they liked it. I added the date of that text to my notes document. February brought something I was not expecting, even with everything I'd been watching and quietly recording. My Google alert for the property address fired. The result was a public filing. The loan was in default. Not 2 months behind, 4 months behind. And there was a notice of default on file with the county. 4 months. I read the filing 3 times. Then I checked the loan servicer portal. Same thing, right there in black and white. 4 months of missed payments. No contact from Carrie, no call, no text, no heads up, nothing. Just silence while my credit was sitting on the edge of a cliff she hadn't bothered to warn me about. I drove to her house that afternoon. I didn't call ahead. I pulled into the driveway and I was sitting there, reading through the notice on my phone again, when I happened to open Facebook, and there was the post. Published 20 minutes earlier, the kitchen reveal, the new countertops, the subway tile, 47 likes climbing to 48. Finally feels like home. I sat in that car for a long time. I did not go to the door. I was not in a place where I could walk through that door and say what I needed to say without the conversation becoming something I would regret. I know myself. I go quiet when I'm hurt, and I go cold when I'm angry, and I was, in that moment, both. So I drove home. I sat down at my kitchen table, and I called Grand Dot. She picked up on the second ring. She listened to everything. She did not interrupt. She did not say, "I told you so," which she had every right to do and which I was grateful she didn't. When I was done, she said, "Okay, what's your move?" I said I needed to know how fast this could damage me. She said, "Call Patricia." I called Patricia the next morning. Patricia pulled up the file. She explained where things stood, what a notice of default meant, how long before it escalated, what my exposure looked like. She said the window to act was not generous. She asked me what I wanted to accomplish. I told her. She said she could do that. Then I opened my notes document and I went through everything I'd recorded over the past 18 months. Missed calls, unanswered texts, the Christmas gift without acknowledgement, the family gathering I wasn't told about, the 2 months behind incident she'd minimized, every piece. I put together a timeline. I saved it, emailed it to myself, printed it. Then I pulled my bank records and I found something I had forgotten about, something I'd been doing quietly for almost the entire time I'd been on that loan. I had been automatically transferring $100 a month to Carrie's Venmo. I know how that sounds. I know. But at the time, when I'd set it up, Kevin's job transition had just happened and things were tight for them, and I just thought, this is a rough stretch. I'll help them through it. And then the rough stretch passed and I never thought to cancel it. I just kept sending it, every month like clockwork, for 26 months. $2,600. I had screenshots of every single transfer. Every one. I added those to the folder. Patricia sent a formal letter to Carrie and Kevin's loan servicer and to their personal address from her firm's letterhead. It outlined my position as co-borrower, referenced the equity agreement by filing date, and stated that I was formally requesting an emergency review of the loan status and initiating the process for a co-borrower release, which under our agreement included either a full refinance that removed me from the note or a formal buyout of my equity stake at assessed value. Carrie called me 3 hours later. I almost didn't pick up. Not out of stubbornness. I was going to have this conversation eventually. I just needed a breath first. I let it ring once more, then I answered. "What is this letter?" she said. "No hello." Her voice was tight and a little shaky underneath the tight. "Jenna, what did you do?" I said, "Carrie, there's a notice of default on file with Knox County. The loan I co-signed is 4 months behind. My credit is attached to that loan. I need to understand what's happening, and I need to know what the plan is to get my name off this note." Silence. Then, "We were going to tell you." "When?" More silence. "It's been complicated," she said. "Kevin's new job, there were some delays in his first paycheck cycle, and then we had some unexpected expenses, and it snowballed, and we were handling it. We were going to handle it. We didn't want to worry you." I said, "Carrie, do you understand that my credit score is tied to this loan? That if this goes to foreclosure, it's not just your life that gets disrupted, it's mine. My ability to get a loan, to rent an apartment, to—" "I know that," she said, and her voice shifted into something harder. "I know that, Jenna. You don't have to explain it like I'm stupid." And there it was. The thing I had been watching approach from a long distance and still wasn't quite prepared for when it arrived. The pivot. The moment when the person who put you in the hard position becomes, somehow, the person you've wronged by noticing. I didn't argue with her. I have learned at 34 that some arguments are not arguments. They are tests of whether you will let your own reality be rearranged by someone else's discomfort. I was not going to pass that test by losing it. I said, "I'm not calling you stupid. I'm telling you what the stakes are." Patricia's letter outlines 2 options. You refinance and remove me from the note, or you buy out my equity at current assessed value. I need this resolved within 60 days. She said, 60 days? Jenna, do you know how hard it is to— Patricia can explain the timeline, I said. Her number is in the letter. We stayed on the phone for another few seconds without talking. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, I can't believe you lawyered up on your own sister. I thought about the birthday card, the kitchen reveal post, the Christmas gift that took a month to acknowledge, the family gathering I found out about through a Facebook photo, the $2,600 I'd sent without thinking, because that's just how I was wired. I didn't wait for things to be asked of me. The notice of default sitting in a public filing while she was tagging contractors on a kitchen reveal. I said, I'll be waiting to hear from Patricia. And I hung up. I want to be straight with you about that because I'm not going to dress this up into a clean revenge arc where everything felt good and satisfying. It didn't. It felt like grief, mostly. It felt like the slow settling of something I'd been refusing to look at directly for years. And looking at it didn't make it hurt less just because I could finally see it clearly. Carrie went through several phases. First, she called Mom, who called me, who told me very gently that Carrie was upset and felt like I'd ambushed her. I said, Mom, the loan is 4 months behind and I found out through a public county filing. Mom got quiet again. She said, I know, sweetheart. That was enough. My mom is not a woman who takes sides in things like this, but she is a woman who, when she goes quiet, is telling you that she hears you. Kevin called me once. That surprised me. He was more direct than Carrie, less emotional, more practical in the way that people are when they know they're in the wrong and have decided that practicality is a better position to argue from than innocence. He asked me if there was any version of this where we didn't involve lawyers. I said yes. They refinanced the loan in their names only within 60 days. He said he'd look into it. I said I'd be waiting. Patricia handled everything else. What happened in those 51 days, I mostly experienced from the outside. I was not part of the negotiations. I was not in the room. Patricia communicated with their side and reported back to me in brief, professional summaries, and I was grateful for that distance because I think being any closer to it would have made it harder to stay level. I was level. I needed to stay level. Kevin called me once more, about 2 weeks in. He was more subdued than the first call. He asked me how I was doing. I thought that was an interesting choice of question under the circumstances. Not a hostile choice, just an interesting one. Like he was trying to find some version of this where we were still people who knew each other, not just opposing parties on a document. I said I was fine. I asked how things were moving. He said they'd found a lender who could work with their situation. I said I was glad to hear it. I meant that. I know that might be hard to believe, but I genuinely did not want the house to foreclose. I didn't want Carrie's life to fall apart. I didn't want any of this to be what it was. I just needed my name off that loan and my equity acknowledged, and I needed it handled in the time frame that protected me. That's not revenge. That's just a person drawing a line in the right place. Finally, after drawing it in all the wrong places for years. The refinance took 51 days. Kevin's new job had stabilized his income enough, and they'd caught up the arrears with some help from Kevin's parents. I don't know the details, and I didn't ask. The new loan was in their names only. My name was removed from the note. The equity agreement triggered a buyout, 15% of the current appraised value minus their loan balance adjustment. The house appraised at $329,000. My 15% came out to just over $38,000 after the calculation was run through Patricia's office. $38,420 wired to my account on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between patients at the clinic. I checked my phone during my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking lot because I'd needed the air. The transfer was there. Confirmed. I sat with that for a moment. Longer than a moment, really. The sun was coming through the windshield at an angle that made me squint, and I just sat there with my phone in my hand and I let myself feel whatever I was feeling, which was not triumph, not satisfaction exactly, but something closer to relief. The kind of relief that lives next to grief because the two things were always connected here. The money was real, so was the loss. Then I thought about the $2,600 I'd sent her on autopilot for 26 months, $100 at a time, while she was forgetting to acknowledge my Christmas gifts and not inviting me to family dinners and letting 4 months of missed mortgage payments pile up without picking up the phone. $2,600 I had never been asked to send, never been thanked for sending, never even been acknowledged for. Just a woman transferring money out of quiet habit and quiet love and quiet belief that the people who received it were somewhere keeping track. They were not keeping track. But I was. I thought, well, I canceled the Venmo transfer that afternoon. It had still been going. I hadn't stopped it in all the chaos of the past 2 months, and somehow that detail, that I had been sending her $100 a month even while Patricia was filing paperwork, even while Carrie was calling me disloyal and lawyered up, felt like the most clarifying thing of all. That's how deep the habit ran. That's how automatic the giving had become. I canceled it, and I sat there a second, and I felt the particular quiet of a chapter that has ended. I haven't spent the $38,000. Not yet. It's in a high-yield savings account, doing its quiet, patient work of sitting there and meaning something. I keep thinking I'll figure out what it's for. A down payment on my own place, maybe. Something I've been putting off in the back of my mind for years, always finding a reason to wait, always finding someone else's urgent thing to put in front of my own slow-burning want. Or maybe just the freedom of having a number that large sit between me and whatever comes next. A cushion, a proof of concept, a reminder that I can do the hard thing when I need to. I haven't decided yet, but I'm not in a hurry. That's new for me, too. Not being in a hurry on my own behalf. I spent so many years moving fast on everyone else's timeline that sitting still with my own decision feels almost unfamiliar. I'm getting used to it. What I do know about that money is this. Every single dollar of it was earned by a woman who showed up consistently for 3 years, who signed her name in good faith, who documented everything not out of suspicion, but out of quiet self-respect, and who retrieved what was hers through the legal mechanism she had the foresight to put in place before any of this went sideways. Not $1 of it was given to her. Not $1 of it was a gift. It was a return. And the difference between those two things is something I am still learning to hold without apology. Carrie and I don't really talk anymore. I'm not going to tell you that there was a tearful reconciliation or a long conversation where she really heard me, because there wasn't. There were a few texts, stilted and careful, the kind you exchange when two people are negotiating the new shape of something without being able to name what they're negotiating. She sent me a message in March that said she was sorry things had gotten so complicated. I read it twice. I wrote back, I know. Because I did. I know exactly how things got complicated. I watched it happen from closer than she realizes. Grandot and I have dinner every other Sunday now. She makes the same pot roast she's been making since I was 9 years old, and we sit at her kitchen table, and we talk about things that matter. Last Sunday, she looked at me over her water glass and she said, "You handled yourself well." Coming from her, that's the full trophy case. I'll take it. My credit score, which had dropped about 30 points during the arrears period, has already started climbing back. Patricia says it'll be fully recovered in under a year. A year is not that long when you think about everything it purchased. Mom called me last Sunday like she always does. She asked if I was doing okay. I said I was. She said, "Good, that's good." And then we talked about ordinary things. Her garden, a book she was reading, a neighbor's new dog. I listened and I thought, this is the part of the family that costs me nothing. This is the part that gives. If you have ever been the person who keeps records, not because you're suspicious, but because somewhere in the back of your head, a quiet voice told you that your generosity might not be visible to the person receiving it. Listen to that voice. Not to become someone hard or transactional or cold. but to stay honest with yourself about what you're giving and to make sure that when the day comes when you need it to mean something on paper, it does. My name is off that loan. The money is in my account. The kitchen I helped fund, with my signature, my credit, my monthly transfers, my patience, is someone else's problem now. I do not wish Carrie badly. I want you to know that. I want her to figure out what she's doing and to be okay. But I also want her to know, even if she never says so out loud, that the foundation that house sits on included me. Not just legally. In the specific daily way that people who are wired a certain way contribute to the lives of people who never think to add it up. I added it up, all of it, and it came out to exactly what it was worth. If you have been the quiet one in your family, the one who transfers the money without being asked, who shows up with no fanfare, who signs the paperwork when someone needs you, and you've started to notice that the people you're doing it for have stopped noticing you back, I want to hear from you. Leave it in the comments. Tell me what it looked like. Tell me what you did. Tell me if you found your way back to yourself, because I did. It's a little quieter over here than I expected. But everything in this space belongs to me, and I haven't had that in a long time. Subscribe if this landed somewhere real. There's more where this came from, and every story is someone's true thing. I'll see you in the next one.